When it comes to buying a home, everybody wants the best deal. But of course, everybody wants to make sure that they're not making a mistake when they're getting those deals. Well, in this video, I'm gonna go over some of the things that could negatively affect a property's value. Whether you're buying a detached home, a townhome, or a condo, we're gonna talk about some of the negative items that could adversely affect the value of the home that you're thinking about buying. My name is Joe Pratap and I'm a RE/MAX realtor. I've been selling real estate for the better half of the last 15 years. If you find this video helpful, do me a favor, click the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. And without further ado, let's get right into today's video. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna talk about is a detached home. And we're gonna go over some of the negative things that will affect the value of a detached house. Some of them might be very common sense to you and some of them you might not think about. So pay attention, let's go over some of those things right now. The first one that we're gonna talk about is location. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yes, location, location, location. I hear about it. I watch all the HGTV shows and I know about location. Let me pause for a second. There's two parts to location. The first one is the physical location, the geographical location. This is important when you are buying a detached home for a lot of reasons. But the location of the home, if it's in a great neighborhood or if it's in a horrible neighborhood, greatly affects the value of that house. Let me give you a prime example. In East Abbotsford, one of the popular neighborhoods in the entire city of Abbotsford is Sandy Hill. Now, when you have a 2-story, 4-bedroom home in Sandy Hill, it isn't on the market very often. Days on the market are usually less than 30 days. If you take that exact same style house and you were to move it just 2 blocks south or 2 blocks west, so that you're leaving the Sandy Hill school catchment or the Sandy Hill community, the home price drops typically between 7 and 15%, depending on how far you go. The neighborhood, the popular neighborhood, the good school makes such a difference. So the location of the home is one of the biggest factors in determining its value. So if you're looking to purchase a detached home, make sure you do so in a good community. Or if you're not and you're looking outside of a community, maybe a little bit more rural, just make sure that the value makes sense, that you're paying for that type of home. Now, the second part to the location is the location of the home in the neighborhood or in the street that you're in. This can impact the property's value tremendously depending on the person who is purchasing the home. Let me give you an example. There are certain religious and ethnic groups who won't purchase homes that are built on pie-shaped lots. There are certain religious and ethnic groups who won't purchase a home that is built sideways. Things like that make a difference in selecting a home for sale when you're thinking about purchasing it. So if you have a home that's, let's just say, on a cul-de-sac and it's a 9,000 square foot lot, but most of it is pie-shaped, for example, versus another home that's for sale on a 9,000 square foot lot that's square or rectangular, there's usually a difference in price because of those types of factors. So if you're looking to purchase, you need to make sure that that is reflected in the price that you're paying for the property. All right, another negative factor in deciding the value of a home is the driveway. If you are looking at a detached home with a flat, usable driveway, the home value is always more than when you have a home with a slanted driveway. And that's for obvious reasons, such as parking, whether kids can play on the driveway. If you're in a neighborhood with lots of hills, like in Coquitlam, Burke Mountain, in Abbotsford, in Port Moody, and more, and steep driveways are a thing, Those are the types of driveways that when it's winter weather and it's snowing outside, you got to make sure they're plowed, they're salted ahead of time. Otherwise, grandpa's coming up the driveway for Christmas dinner and he's doing a header down the driveway with the turkey in his hand, right? Those types of things make a big difference. The incline driveway or the steep driveway, when you have two homes in the same area and you're choosing between one with a flat driveway, one with a sloped driveway, there is always a value difference in price. The negative value will be associated anytime you have something like a steep driveway. All right, another item that could negatively affect a detached home's value is the floor plan and specifically the stairs that are in that floor plan. A typical two-story home, basement entry, will usually have one set of stairs getting up to the main level. And that style home is usually the most common, especially in neighborhoods that were built in the 90s and early 2000s. Now, when you look at older generation homes, homes that were built in the 80s, homes that were built in the 70s, for example, it is more common to see things like split entry, where you have multiple staircases going in different directions. That is something that usually negatively affects the value of a home. Meaning if you have home A for sale, that is your typical two-story home with one staircase to go upstairs, and you have home B for sale in the same neighborhood, that is a split entry with multiple stairways. Generally speaking, the home with the least amount of stairs and the easiest floor plan is going to be worth more money. And the split entry or the home with more stairs is going to be worth less money. Another item that would negatively affect the detached home value is parking and garage space. Now, a garage is something that a lot of people either prefer or they don't. When you're looking at older homes that were built in the 1980s, 1970s or older, it's more common to see things like carports or covered parking and less garages, unless they've been enclosed over time. But these days, almost everybody wants storage so that you can maximize how much livable square footage is on the inside of your homes. So a home today that has a garage that can park is going to be worth more money than a home that does not have a garage or that has a carport. In the same neighborhood, you can see a value difference of a minimum 5% for homes that have a finished garage, and homes with even bigger or more extravagant garages are going to be worth even more money. All right, so we're moving on to townhomes. Now, you might be thinking, when I buy a townhome, it's in a community that has multiple units. It's not uncommon that some townhouse complexes have 100 or 200 units, depending on where you are and how big the community is. But the best way that you can compare values of a townhouse is by looking at new construction. And if you look at new construction townhomes, you'll see that depending on where the unit is in the complex, how much parking there is, there's always gonna be a difference in values. And when you're looking at what a townhome is worth on the resale, there's a bunch of negative things that you need to know that could affect the value of the townhome you're thinking of purchasing. And the first one that we're gonna start with is parking. Now, a lot of townhomes that were built in the 2000s were built with tandem style garages, so parking front to back, and no exterior parking, meaning that your guests that come and visit you will have to park in a visitor spot, hopefully, or somewhere on a nearby road. That style townhome in general is usually going to sell for less money than something that has parking in front of the driveway. I don't know how many times I've shown a home to somebody, and when we've come to make an offer, they've not realized the difference between different floor plans in townhome communities. A townhome that has a third parking stall in front of that style parking is generally going to be worth more money. When you don't have something like that, it's going to be worth less money. Which brings us to the next style parking, which is the side-by-side garage style parking, where you have a garage that you can fit 2 vehicles in side by side. Now that style of garage is usually more common when the townhome is a little bit larger, but that style parking is far superior for a lot of people for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, if you're parking a large vehicle in there, you're still gonna have room for storage. And number two, you're gonna get 2 vehicles in there side by side where you're not having to move or shuffle vehicles around if somebody's parked behind you. That side-by-side garage is usually gonna sell for more money. Now, the last thing when it comes to parking to look for is if you're buying a resale unit in a complex that has exterior parking immediately connected to the townhouse, it is going to be worth more money than something that doesn't. In the townhome complex that we used to live in Cloverdale, the Westfield, we had a driveway that was angled. So you could actually park 1 vehicle in front of the side-by-side garage, but you couldn't right next to it because the driveway was angled. When we sold our townhome, it sold for about $30,000 less than one of the neighbors who had a driveway that was 10 feet longer and completely square. So you could actually park 2 bigger vehicles in front of the garage, the 2-car garage, for a total of 4 parking spots in the neighbor's townhome. So when you're looking at different locations inside a townhome, something to consider that'll negatively or positively affect the value is the parking. Another item on the topic of townhomes that could negatively affect the value is access to the outdoor space. The most common floor plans are usually when you walk off of the main floor into some type of outdoor space, a backyard, or a style of patio. That type of townhome is the most sought after for a couple reasons. If you have kids, the kids can simply just walk out the back door. If you have pets, you can let the dog out, for example, so it can do its business without having to go up and down different types of stairs. The type of floor plan that you may want to consider if you're purchasing to avoid is when you have a balcony or a patio on the main level and you have to access the outdoor space through the garage. When you have a townhome complex that has layouts that differ, anytime you access the garage, anytime you access the outdoor space through a garage, that style townhome will generally sell for less money than when you're walking out off of the main floor into the backyard space. When you're buying a townhome, another item that could negatively affect the value and something to consider is purchasing an inside unit versus an end unit in a townhome complex. When you have a resale home for sale, the inside unit is always going to be the harder one to sell, and it's always going to sell for less money. Because when a lot of people look for townhomes, the end units are generally harder to find because they're usually placed at the end of a cluster of 4 or 6 or 8, making them more popular. When you look at a brand new townhome community, it's not uncommon that the end unit is usually a higher price point, anywhere between $20,000 and $50,000. It's usually gonna have extra windows, it's usually gonna have more parking, and sometimes can have a bigger outdoor space because there's more land to work with around that townhome. So if you're thinking about buying an inside unit, something to consider is the value may be a little bit lower than an end unit townhome. All right, let's switch gears now and let's talk about some of the things that can negatively affect a condo. So if you're thinking about buying a condo, you're getting into the condo market, these are some of the things that could negatively affect the value of your condo. The very first thing is going to be parking. Now, it is not uncommon for many condos to just have 1 parking stall. And when you're looking at values of condos, whether it be a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom, anytime that you have a condo with a second parking stall, it's usually gonna sell for more money. Meaning, if you have a condo with just 1 parking stall, it's gonna be a negative in terms of the value of the condo. Another thing to consider is where the condo is positioned inside of the building. Is it a ground floor, a first floor, a second floor, a third floor, and so on? Typically speaking, when you have a condo that's between the first floor and the top floor, it's usually gonna sell for less money. Now, the exception would be in a high rise with views. But when we're looking at a typical 4-story, 5-story, or 6-story building, the in-between floors are always gonna sell for lower money, meaning the first floor and the top floor will sell for the most amount of money. Why? Because some people prefer the garden level. It quite often has an outdoor space you can use for the kids, for the pets, or for entertaining. And on the top floor, it's generally a premium because you have no neighbors living above you. Now, of course, when you have a concrete building and it's a high rise, things like views then come into play. When you're living on the top floors, when you have something like a view, the top floors are always going to be worth more money because you have that view. Another thing to consider that may negatively affect the value of a condo is the high strata fee. Are you paying $500, $600, $700 a month for a high strata fee? And if you are you getting anything from it? Let me give you an example. There is an awesome condo complex in Clayton called the Waterstone. The Waterstone has some of the highest strata fees of condo buildings built in the mid-2000s when you compare other buildings around Surrey. But it has one of the best clubhouse amenity centers in the entire Fraser Valley. It has an indoor pool. It has a hot tub. It has a cinema room that you can book out for events like FIFA or UFC. It has an amazing gym, and there's even outdoor barbecues that you can use if you're a resident and you're having a party. So if you're paying a little bit of a higher strata fee, you're getting something in return. Now, if you're paying a high strata fee and there's no amenities, that is something that would negatively affect the value of the condo. Another item that can negatively affect the price or the value of a condo is living too close to the elevator shaft. Now, hear me out for a second. There are people who will never live close to the elevator because it's a high traffic area. You have people coming and going all the time, and very rarely do condo buildings have more than one elevator. It happens, but it's less common. So if you have a home that is typically closer to the elevator than further away from the elevator, that's usually a negative when it comes to valuing a property. All right, that's it. So I hope you learned something. If you're thinking about buying a home, those are all the things that could negatively affect the value. Hopefully you can use that to make an offer. And if you're selling a home, you can use that information to think about pricing your home appropriately when you're talking about your real estate agent's evaluation on where the home is worth. Now, if you have any real estate related questions, the easiest way to get a hold of me, you can click the link below and you can schedule a call at a time that works for you. My name is Joe Pratap with RE/MAX. Thanks for watching.